6 years ago, I was sitting in my car in a parking lot behind our neighborhood shopping center. If I hadn't been crying so hard, I could have seen the sign in the upstairs window. It was a large black circle with a triangle in the middle, the Alcoholics Anonymous sign. But to me, it might as well have said, "You are a huge failure, you have screwed everything up, and now you get to go and sit around with a bunch of other losers who couldn't quit drinking or doing drugs on their own." My name is Penelope Taylor, and I want to share my philosophy called Eff the Past. I was sitting in my car because I didn't want to go to an AA meeting, but I couldn't go home unless I did. What I wanted to do was disappear. I wanted to blink my eyes or wave my magic wand and transport myself to some different, better place. But I couldn't. I was 50 years old and my life was a mess. I was anxious all the time. I couldn't sleep, and when I got up in the morning, my stomach was upset, my head was throbbing. My husband barely spoke to me except to lecture or to yell. And my daughter, who was 18 at the time and just about to graduate high school, wouldn't be in the same room with me unless she had to. I knew if I had any chance of salvaging my relationships, I had to make some kind of a massive change. But at the same time, I was paralyzed by fear. I was afraid that I couldn't quit drinking. Afraid that if I did quit drinking, I'd have to face all the damage I caused in my life. Afraid that my marriage was over, afraid that my daughter was never going to forgive me. Truthfully, I was afraid of just about everything. Which brings me to the first F, which is feel the fear and do it anyway. Somehow, I forced myself out of the car and up the stairs, and I sat down in a meeting. I sat down at the very back, and I kept my head down so that no one could look me in the eye. But as I sat there and started listening to people sharing, the knot in my stomach started to loosen just a little, and my terror started to lessen. And so I stayed. I'd like to tell you that I was never afraid after that first meeting, but that wasn't my experience. My experience was that you'll be afraid over and over, and you'll have to face it over and over. Basically, if we're still living, we're going to be afraid. So I kept on trying to face the fear. I'd also like to tell you that after that first meeting, I did everything right. I'd like to, but I can't. I backslid. I couldn't quite seem to get sobriety to stick. And after a while, I figured out why, because I was holding on to all this anger and bitterness, and so I couldn't fully commit to making a change. I was angry that my 20-plus year marriage was over. Angry that I was still living in Texas, so far from the rest of my family. And most of all, I was angry about a senseless car accident that had badly injured my daughter and taken the life of her grandmother. And here's the thing about anger. It can make you feel powerful. Anger fills you up and it pushes aside the things you don't want to feel, like grief or vulnerability. But by hanging on to that anger, it was impossible for me to move forward. Which brings me to the second F of Eff the Past. Forgive everyone, including yourself. There were things that had happened in my life, particularly that accident, that seemed inexplicable and very unfair. But here's what I had to learn about forgiveness. Forgiveness does not mean that you say, "That was okay with me, that was acceptable." What it means is that by forgiving, you can let go of that anger and bitterness and begin to change your life. Forgiveness, I believe, is truly a gift that you have to give yourself. When I figured that out, I was able to forgive other people, but forgiving myself was a lot harder. Psychologists say that guilt is a useless emotion. What does that mean? We can do whatever we want. We all get a free pass, and we can just brush that annoying angel off our shoulders? No, but guilt in and of itself changes nothing. Let me give you an example. Say that you borrow someone's car without asking and put a very big dent in it, which may or may not have been something that I did. Feeling guilty about it doesn't fix the dent. You have to say you're sorry and mean it, even if the other person won't accept it. And then you have to make things right. You have to fix the dent, mend the fences, metaphorical or otherwise, and keep making things right. So I tried to do that. But it was very lonely work, which leads me to the third F, which is find your tribe. My mom and my sisters were very supportive, but they were also thousands of miles away. So, after the first several meetings, I forced myself to go out to coffee with some of the other women in the group. Then I signed up for service work, which basically meant driving women to meetings and to rehab, watching their kids, helping them move. It filled up my hours, and it made me start to feel useful again. In turn, my new tribe helped me to find an apartment. They talked to me in the middle of the night when I texted them in a panic, and they taught me to laugh again when I thought nothing would ever be funny. Perhaps most importantly, these good, strong women shared their mistakes with me, which allowed me to see that I wasn't the worst person in the world, just another flawed human being trying to do better. It wasn't in my plan to be starting my life over again at age 50, to be redoing everything almost from scratch, but it's what I had to do. My daughter doesn't like talking about that time very much, and I completely understand that. I am very grateful that she's in my life again and that we're as close as we are. But several months ago, we were talking on the phone, and in the past few years, she has lost several friends to addiction. And she said, "Gosh, Mom, that must have been so hard. I mean, you're kind of like a hero or something." We changed the subject quickly, but I'll never forget her saying that. Last May, she graduated from college. And after the ceremony was over, we were standing outside on the lawn, posing for pictures. My ex-husband was on the other side of my daughter. And as we were waiting, he caught my eye, and we shared a smile, full of joy and pride and not a little relief. 6 years ago, that moment could never have happened. But by saying Eff the Past and following these new steps, I was able to let go of anger and bitterness and feel a freedom I hadn't thought possible. Before I close, I want to add one more F. It's not a step, it's a persistent current that runs underneath the other ones. And that is faith. Faith in a power greater than myself. Faith in the inherent goodness of other people. And faith that by saying Eff the past and following these steps, I could build a new life for myself. So, if you're feeling stuck for whatever reason, I'd encourage you to feel the fear, forgive everyone, and find your tribe, and then you can turn to face your future. Thank you.